Salve, and welcome to another edition of Discamus Linguam Latinam Domi. Um, and today, the topic of conversation is purpose clauses. Okay, let's take a look right off the bat at just an example of one. And so, reading aloud: Discipula litteram magistro eis scribit, ut auxilium petat. Okay, so the thing to know about purpose clauses is that they're going to be neatly contained, and they're going to essentially, the goal being to explain the purpose of whatever the main clause action was. And the main clause action is going to be stuff we've already all learned, right? Just the regular sentences that we've been translating since Latin 1. But now we can say, include in our sentence, why the action of the main clause happened in the first place. What was the goal of it? So take a look at this and see if you can kind of just translate this line first, and then translate the second part of the line in a way that's going to explain the reason for doing this action. Okay? So take a second, pause the video, and then I will give you the answer and we'll walk through it. All right, so here we go. Here is the answer. Purpose clause exemplum. Yes. So the discipula, the student, writes, scribit, a letter, direct object, to the teacher, to, and not just any teacher, his teacher. Okay, so the student writes discipula scribit litteram to the magistro eis. Ut, and now we're going to find out why, in order to seek help. Right? Why? So that he might seek help in order to seek help. Right? And so that's going to be the baseline translation. So when we see ut and we think it's a purpose clause, we're going to translate ut as in order to or so that. Let's look at this now organized. All right, so we have our goal, right? That ut clause explains the purpose of the main clause, which is the clause operating around the indicative verb in the sentence. We recognize it because it's in a subordinate clause introduced by ut, or if you're saying that someone did something so that something else might not happen, in order to not do something, you'd introduce it with a ne instead of an ut. Okay? This makes it recognizable relative to the other two subjunctive usages we've learned so far, which retrieval practice, what are they? Optative and volative. Because both of those, if you recall, are in the main clause of the sentence. There's no indicative verb introduced that needs to introduce them. They stand on their own. Let's fight, or if only we would find land, right? There's no introductory indicative verb. The main verb is in the subjunctive. So this is new. And it's going to be easy to recognize because when we see ut or ne introducing the subjunctive, we know, oh, this is probably a purpose clause usage. And when we see that, we're going to translate that subjunctive clause if the subject of the clause is the same as the main clause. We're going to translate it as to verb or in order to verb. So ut plus the subjunctive will be in order to fight or to fight. Or if the main clause subject is different from the purpose clause subject, we're going to translate so that the new subject might or may verb. Now this is all very abstract, so let's look at some concrete examples to help us apply this and sort of get more comfortable with it. So here are some examples. You can pause the video and maybe look back at some of the other slides to see, look at this slide and then try and translate these sentences. Or you can listen to me walk through these if you'd like. But pause the video now if you want to try to translate them on your own. All right, so here are the answers. And let's look at these one at a time. Okay, so again, you can just translate this part of the sentence up to the ut, just like you always were able to. Main clause, you find your subject, magister, that's the teacher. Next case is accusative, so I know that the teacher is doing something to the students, and the teacher is teaching the students. Magister docet discipulos. Ut, and now I'm either going to translate this as an order to verb or so that the new subject might verb. And the best way to know which way to translate the ut is to look and say, all right, doket, does that have the same person and number as the new verb? No, it does not, which means that the subject has changed between the main clause, again, this part of the sentence, and the subordinate clause, this part of the sentence. And so if the subject changes, we look back here and we say, oh, it's different subject. So I'm going to translate it as, so that subject, new subject, might or may verb. The teacher teaches the students so that they, which is the new subject, right? There's no new nominative, so I take it from the verb, so that they might learn. Okay? Does that kind of make this a little bit more clear? When we walk to the next one, it should become more clear. Again, where is my main clause and where is my subordinate clause? Think aloud and I'll give you the answer. This is the main clause, just laborat, all by itself. Ut introduces the subordinate clause. So ut kibum habeat. He works, laborat. And now, is the subject the same or different? They're both third singular. There's no new nominative introduced. So I'm going to say he works in order to have food. He works in order to have food. Laborat ut kibum habeat. All right, does that make sense? So now we go back here and we say, oh, the subject was the same. So I can translate it as to verb or in order to verb. He works to have food. He works in order to have food. Okay, next one. Tuus frater discedit ne mala verba audiat is the subject. Well, first off, what's the main clause? What's the subordinate clause? Tuus frater discedit is the main clause. Ne now has taken the place of ut, which means that the subordinate clause here will be negative, not positive. But we have our subjunctive verb here. So your brother leaves in order to not hear the bad words. And I said in order to not, because again, discedit third singular, audiat third singular. So the subject has remained the same. There's no new nominative. So nothing has changed there. All right? Okay. So maybe go back and try and translate these again on your own now. Pause the video and see, all right, can I walk through the steps and translate them on your own? Correct any mistakes you made, because we're going to go learn something a little bit new. And so I want you to feel confident with this before you move on. All right? So, but I'm going to move on now. So pause the video if you haven't. Sequence of tenses. All right. So you'll notice that this box looks a little bit confusing. Let's ground it in context. In all these sentences, the main verb in the main clause, doket, laborat, discedit, they're all what tense? They're all present tense. So for all of those sentences, we were in this first column here. Whenever the main clause verb is present, the subjunctive verb here, discat, habeat, audiat, will be present subjunctive as well. Okay? So the question now, though, is what if I wanted to make doket, dokuit, laborat, laboravit, discedit, discessit, essentially making them all past tense, right? All perfect tense main clauses. Then I have to also, in Latin, that would change the tense that the Roman would use in the subordinate clause. And that's what it shows here. Instead of using the present subjunctive, you'd use the imperfect subjunctive. The imperfect subjunctive? Yeah. So some of you might be a little flabbergasted here. Whoa, Mr. Fleming, we haven't learned that tense yet. What's this? This tense, the subjunctive. You're throwing in all these sorts of things in the video. I'm doing it because this tense is a really easy tense of the subjunctive to learn. So let's learn it real quick. Imperfect subjunctive. Formation. Second principal part plus endings. So this is very similar to what we've done before in the indicative, except for now we're not going to chop off the RE. So if I want to use the imperfect of amo, third singular, it becomes amaret. I go to the third principal part, right, amare, and I just slap a T on there, amaret. So amabat becomes amaret in the subjunctive. What does that mean monebat and mitebamus would become? using this formula. Pause the video and try and do it on your own. Yes, we see Amabat became Amaret, Monebant becomes Monerent again, right? Second principal part, throw in the third person plural ending, OST, mustisent. Mitebamus becomes Miteremus, right? Again, mito, mitere, third conjugation, slap an MUS on there. Same rule works for every conjugation. The subjunctive is so organized. It's delightful. All right, moving on. More examples. So now you'll notice these sentences are really similar, but I've just changed the tense in the main verb, and see how it's also changed the tense of the subordinate verb, the subordinate clause verb. You can try and translate these on your own. The nice thing about this is that we're not really going to change how we translate this verb in the subordinate clause, even though the tense of the subjunctive has changed in English. We don't really change the tense. So you don't really have to worry about changing your translation based on with purpose clauses based on the form you see here, okay? Whether it's present or imperfect. All right, so try and translate these on your own, what sounds logical to you in English after you translate the main clause and the new tense, and then I'll show you the examples. Here are the examples. All right, I'm not going to walk through these, but you'll notice that so that they might learn, in order to have food, in order to not hear bad words, the translations have remained the same of the subordinate clauses. Again, the main thing is just thinking about, is it a new subject in the subordinate clause, or is it, this should be disgerent, or is it, yeah, this should also have been disgerent, sorry. Or has the subject changed, okay? All right, well, we'll talk more about this in class. Don't worry if it doesn't make complete sense yet. All right, good work.